Government shutdowns aren't just politics in Washington. They trickle down to households, businesses, and your retirement accounts. So let's talk about what really happens and what you can do about it. Welcome back to Intentional Wealth with Tiffany Tippins, the podcast where your money is aligned with purpose and your wealth is built with strategy, legacy, and intention. I'm your host, Tiffany Tippins. A shutdown happens when Congress fails to pass funding bills. Federal workers may be furloughed or asked to work without pay. Government services like benefit processing, tax returns, even small business loans may get delayed. The ripple effect touches contractors, small business owners, and even the general economy. A shutdown will not impact essential services. Areas like the military, TSA, or border control will never be impacted by a shutdown. Also, a shutdown does not impact your benefits for Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. Other services like mail delivery, a shutdown will not affect. So you don't have to worry about your mail being impacted. Some things that are impacted by the shutdown are federal workers. Thousands of federal workers may be asked to be furloughed or asked to work without pay. Government services like benefits, processing, tax returns, and even small business loans may even get delayed. The ripple effect touches contractors, small business owners, and even the general economy. Whether you are a federal worker or not, here are 5 financial tips to protect yourself and your money. The first tip is to build and protect your cash flow. Now, you've heard it before. 3 to 6 months of living expenses should be set aside in an emergency fund. That may be practical for some, but very difficult for others. Here's how to address it. An emergency fund is really a non-negotiable. It's the buffer when income gets interrupted. So for W-2 earners, automate your savings. Get a fixed amount taken out of your paycheck every 2 weeks. For business owners, build multiple streams of income. For instance, if you're a small business consulting company, you may charge consulting services for individual or corporate clients. Another way to add to their revenue is produce books or possibly courses or even build community around your consulting services. So when one of those revenue streams like meeting individual or corporate clients is interrupted, the other multiple revenue streams are not. Tip 2 is know your risk. Shutdowns can shake down the stock market and investments may dip temporarily. Risk tolerance is about how you handle volatility when the stock market goes up and down. Now, as you've seen over the last several months, the stock market has been up, and it's easy to love the stock market when it's up. But what happens when it drops? This is where my risk tolerance questionnaire comes in. When working with new clients, I ask, if the stock market drops, how long would you stay in the investment? Will you add more shares while prices are low, or would you panic and sell? Your answers help me as your advisor, or if you're working with an advisor, stay the course or pivot when it's time. Good planning is about preparing for both ups and downs in the market. Tip 3, diversify your income and investments. Don't rely on just one stream of income or one asset class. If you're a federal worker, you cannot control your paycheck during a shutdown, but you can start building outside investments or a small side hustle. If you're a business owner tied to government contracts, it's time to ask, what other clients or industries can I serve? You can think of it like not putting all your groceries in one thin bag. You want backups if one breaks. We've been talking about diversifying your income, and what a great way to introduce our special guest, Dr. Anitra Manning of Everyday Grief Incorporated. Hello, Dr. Manning. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, Tiffany. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So tell me more about Everyday Grief Incorporated and your role in your company.
Thank you again, Tiffany. And so, Everyday Grief Incorporated is a transition consultancy. And the work that we do is really around supporting employers as well as employees who are going through high stakes transitions, such as layoffs. We think about leaves of absence and also
Hmm.
promotions. And we support them through services that really support overall well being and that also protect the company's culture and that of the individual employee so that they continue to be whole.
Excellent. I know you have a personal connection with this of what government employees are going through today. Can you talk a little bit about your personal journey?
Yeah, Tiffany. So I've been through 5 job role eliminations, and I'm very clear about talking about them as job role eliminations because it's not about me per se, but it's about the business and things that were happening at the companies that I worked at.
Hmm.
So many of them, when you are working for many years, as I was, they go through many different kinds of things. There are ebbs and flows to every single business cycle. And there are times when companies may go through a restructure because of just
Hmm.
a simple shift in the company's strategy. There are things that happen related to closures of a business or an entity. Sometimes there's a lower revenue expectation that is happening. And so companies will spin off or change a strategy around a particular way of work. And so they lay off an entire unit as a result. I've been through 2 economic related downturns in particular. And those are also ways that companies have some level of change that's happening. But so many of the ones that I went through, the other 3 were around significant types of business strategy changes. And so that's what leads to some of those shifts. So that was one of my core stories. And so when you are going through a layoff, there's a lot involved in that.
Sure.
When you go through a layoff, it is a real hit to your overall sense of identity. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
attached to your status because when you go into a room and you've been laid off, people don't come toward you the way they used to when you had a job.
Hmm.
You're just yourself.
Hmm.
And so when you enter into a room, it's very, very different. Your identity, sometimes you are attached to the places that you worked. So people will know you as an extension of the brand and not you yourself. And so that can
Right.
be a significant shift in the way that we show up for ourselves and with others. So layoffs can have a lot to do with how we are seeing our sense of self-worth, our capability. We question even our last performance conversation, like, did I do that well? And there's a
Hmm.
lot of rumination that happens in light of the layoff. Sometimes there's some level of distancing that one puts between themselves and others because they just don't feel like they can take their whole truth. Sometimes there's some shame, sense of lack of worthiness, insecurity that comes up. And then within households, it's a whole concern about whether or not I'm able to make a contribution. And so now it
Sure.
also creates some shifts in the relationships in the household as well. And for some, there is no plan B. So you do have to make some really quick shifts.
So talking about shifts, you pivoted from your layoff. And I know at the time that you were in between that time of collecting your severance and deciding on what was next.
Hmm.
And there was an opportunity that came about for you that really connected to you where you were able to impact others. Can you talk a little bit about that pivot and how it led to Everyday Grief Incorporated?
You know, the good thing for me is that I maintained the relationships that I had when I was working. So one of those relationships wound up being with an executive that I used to work with. And she knew that I was starting up my own company because I had been laid off and we were in contact. And she says, you know, I have this current relationship with this group of wonderful and amazing Fortune 500 companies. Would you be interested in doing some work on this existing contract? Of course, I said yes. And so that put me in the path of being able to have some additional marquee clients that I would be working with. And that was a wonderful way for me to make that segue in. Now, at the same time, there were some other things going on. By the time I started connecting with her again and also reconnecting with my existing network, I had already worked through my severance package. I had a plan around that. There were things that needed to be taken care of because it wasn't just a severance package. I had a holistic set of things that was happening in my life. I had different kinds of investments. I had properties. I had other things that I needed to take care of. So it wasn't just making sure that I was eating. I had to make sure that those properties were well taken care of. So there's so many things that goes into the decisions. I wouldn't want someone to listen and think that, oh, it's just turned key. You've got to be able to think through what's actually happening and have a very clear picture of your financial outlook. What's actually on the spreadsheet of your life? Are your liabilities and your assets connecting in a way that makes sense so that you can pivot and make those decisions? And for some people, that's not going to be an easy turnkey kind of thing that they can do. It wasn't easy for me. Even though I did it, it was not easy. Every day was a walk of faith because you just don't know what it is that you're going to go through. And so, because of that, and also I was going to school at the same time. So, while I was working, I was also attending seminary. So many things were up in the air for me. So, it required a lot of sitting down, praying, thinking through it, talking to my financial advisor, talking to my family, identifying what is the strategy that I needed to play in order to move forward and not be in a place of the past, but moving forward into the future. One that honored everything that I was in terms of my experience, in terms of my capabilities, and then that would keep me looking forward to who I could become.
Excellent. So we'll be just transparent with the listeners. I am your financial advisor, your
true.
wealth manager. And when this happened, because I've seen you through these times before, but this time was different. And especially because that contract that you had with a former colleague, I saw that really resonating with you and the impact that you were providing. And a lot of times I have clients who sometimes are, even after a layoff, they're burnt out from corporate America and they're not done with working, but it's more purposeful with what they're looking to do with their work. You were in seminary school, and we talked a little bit about the contract and some other avenues where you could take that in the future. And so you talked about grief, and I really want to dig into that. You are now an executive coach and a trained chaplain. So kudos for you. But as we were planning this, like you said, it was not easy. You were going to school, starting a business, and you also had financial obligations that you had to work through. Even though you're an executive coach and you're a trained minister, you were still going through some things on your own. Speak to how listeners can cope with either being laid off or furloughed, as many are with the government at this time.
So there were a lot of things happening in my life around the time that everything got started. And while I was in seminary, I had no idea that I would actually have this whole pivot toward becoming an executive coach independent of any larger organization. I'd been coaching for almost a decade within corporate. And I had the opportunity to support multiple careers and see so many of my clients mature within the organizations they were situated and get promotions. I also work with people who were having performance issues and those who were leaving organizations. So I had a lot of different things I already had in my personal toolkit that allowed me to be successful in my career. Now, when I got to my discernment session within my seminary studies, it became abundantly clear that there was a way to integrate everything that I was studying in seminary, everything that I had been doing within corporate America, and really have an integration between my two worlds. And that full integration is what brought me to Everyday Grief Incorporated. And what I do is I have a grief informed approach to the way that I do my work around transitions to support people in moving from one stage of life to the next. And it allows them to get the full benefit of the way that so much of change is indeed spiritual. Because change involves things that we actually cannot see. There are things happening within our physical bodies that really does explain how we process change. Everyone processes change very differently based on their families of origin, their life histories, their career histories. Things that are happening in their overall lives really do impact how they see themselves and how they change. And so I wanted to bring all of that together, and I did. And now I do have this amazing practice. So for people who are navigating this particular period of time where they're going through uncertainty, whether or not it is a furlough, which is simply a real way of when someone no longer is receiving compensation, but they still have to work full time. That can significantly impact the way that you see yourself, your worth, your value in the workplace. It can bring about some level of uncertainty and limited clarity around, can you build a future within that context that does not pay you your worth? Does it want to support you and your family? I mean, here's a contract that you've made to show up every day, but one part of the contract is being supported, which is I'm giving my expertise, my value. I'm still being able to make sure that the government is being run. And in return, the government writes me a check with a zero balance every single week. So that does not lead to one's honoring of their values nor their value in the workplace. So that's one thing. Then there's when we are in a time when people are being laid off. And both of these things begin to speak to our ethics as well as our values, right? So it's about, I'm not receiving a check and I'm going to be in this place of ultimate stress because now I have to think about financially, I'm not where I used to be. I don't have the certainty of income coming in anymore. The cash flow has changed. And so both of those people, the people who are going through the furlough, people who've gone through a layoff, they're both in this position of significant uncertainty. What do you do when your resources are no longer what they used to be? That's where they find themselves. And so there are shifts around one's identity, there are shifts around one's status, one's sense of who you are relative to your career and your industry. Will people, if you decide to go somewhere else, will they see you as someone of value if you have a significant amount of time of gap in your employment history? So it's all of these questions. Then there's the question of I need to contribute to my household. I need to make sure that the bills are paid, tuition. If you have pre-existing health conditions that your former employer was covering, but on the marketplace, there's not that same kind of health coverage, then you have to stay on COBRA. Right.
You're right.
Then you have to stay on
COBRA is expensive.
And COBRA is expensive. COBRA is more than a car payment, right? And so, close to it, because nowadays people have car payments almost $1,000. But it's so much more expensive than once, your severance package, you start looking at that. And eventually, just to have basic medical coverage, you're going to make a nice dent into your severance. Then that's just on top of, I got to pay the house note, car has to be paid, I have to eat, I still have to put gasoline in the car because I'm going to these networking events. It's a lot that's going on, and there's a lot of stress. And a layoff, furlough, creates a trigger of so much stress. And so what we want to see happen in the way that we work, and I'm speaking as a chaplain right now, is we want to see people be able to manage their load, that they're not putting too much on themselves, that they're able to recognize that this is a stressful event and have a coping strategy associated with that stressful event. That is not just going on and there's no real capacity. And so we have to evaluate our capacity. Do we have the ability to have a spiritual strategy? Are you going to church? Are you engaged in your community? Are you able to talk to someone, a trusted friend, about what you're going through? Do you have a plan that includes how you will take time to do some mindfulness, some reminders of who you really are? We talk about this practice of having compassion and care for the self. And so, how do
Mhm.
you bring yourself to a level of emotional regulation? And by keeping yourself reminded of who you are, maybe having a joyous place that you could return to mentally to support yourself. Do you have people that are in your life that's going to ask about you? Make sure that you get some physical activity every day. Things that are going to support your well being. So that is
Mhm.
the work that I do. And that's what's really important when it's time that when you are going through these kinds of transitions, that you have
Mhm.
an overall emotional and spiritual strategy so that you're able to be whole in a times of transition, because that's really important.
I love that. Basically, you're saying take inventory,
Take
right? Take
inventory.
inventory of your mental, your spiritual, and your physical self. Because I know that so many people are feeling the stress
Mhm.
right now, and it is uncertain times. And a lot of times when you are stressed, you make decisions out of fear. And that is definitely when you want to reach out to the proper resources, whether they're professionals like yourself, your pastor, therapist, financial advisor to help walk you through the different stages of grief that you're going through. What are some other practical tips?
Well, I can say that there are so many things that we can all do. One thing I want to invite your listeners to do is to be sure that they are being honest about where they are and what they're feeling. Don't think it's a thing of shame to not have your
Mhm.
earnest feelings come into play. You might feel many different things. We have a thing
Mhm.
called the feelings wheel, that helps you to locate what your emotions are. And so, one of the key things that I sincerely invite people to do before they do anything else, because it will be very easy for one to neglect the fact that they actually are experiencing a level of grief by doing all these other things that delays the processing of the grief. And so you will
Mhm.
spend time doing things on LinkedIn, going to networking events, watching people on YouTube or telling you, this is what I did to recover
Mhm.
from this job
Yeah.
loss. And all those things are going to be good. And they may even feel healthy for a period of time. But I want to invite every one of your listeners to stop, take emotional inventory. We've been talking about inventory, but take emotional inventory and really locate what that feeling of loss is like for you. Because if you don't do that, if you don't slow down, it will catch up with you at some point.
Mhm.
It will find you, and it will also come up in how you make decisions. And you don't know that it's going back to the original source of grief. And so if
Mhm.
you don't sit down and make the time to really be with it, to locate your emotions, to unpack it, it will follow you.
Mhm.
And we don't want that. We want to be able to enter into all that is new with a nice, healthy, clean slate, having done the work of processing and releasing what was so you can step into the new, well and whole. Without that, it is difficult. And I will tell
Mhm.
you that each one of the times that I've been laid off, what has been so amazing is that I've observed this very thing. I would think, oh, I can just apply for this job because, the marketplace needs me. I
Mhm.
have all these amazing skills. I mean, I'll get hired pronto. It will take no time at all. And I'm
Mhm.
here to tell you that it never quite happened according to my optimism. It
Mhm.
happened according to a very spiritual process of release. I had
Mhm.
to go through a process where I had to believe again. I had to let go of what was so that I had to do a complete detachment, full release of the
Mhm.
person I was in order to be into this new person I would need to become. If I applied for, and I did, truthfully, I did apply for a lot of jobs, but nothing was successful until I identified who I wanted to become next.
I love
So
that.
that is the process that I teach my clients, is how to do that. And I have a framework around that, how important it is to really do that work of release And that can go for anyone that's going into a promotion to a new job too. You have to be able to go through the holistic release of what was in order to step more firmly into what is becoming. That is a spiritual phenomenon, which is why I'm so grateful to have had the time to sit and settle and be in seminary, do this chaplaincy work. And so I can marry that together with executive coaching, because now that's, I think, what the people really do need is a whole strategy. And it is not something that you can easily get. You can go to a therapist, and I do recommend that, because there are some things that are in our patterns that speak to our families of origin. Coaches are good to help you to move forward. And so in my work, that is my focus, is on forward movement. I trust that you are whole and able to move life forward, and we're going to work together to get you there. So in addition to doing the grief work with a great counselor, a coach, a therapist, in addition to journaling, doing your own process of lament, maybe church going, spending time with a priest, rabbi, a pastor, or dear friends. I think those are all important. One of the things I think we can never, ever, ever forget how important it is that we keep our friend groups intact, that we find communities that we can connect with. When we go through breakups, one of the first things that happens is that your girls descend on your crib, right? And they make sure that you're well. They bring over wine and food because they're concerned that you have not eaten. If you lose a loved one, there's casseroles that's coming over to your house. There's a meal train coming for you. But when you go through a breakup of work and your work is no longer coming in, you are on your own. How important it would be for us to be able to find others that we can talk to who may be going through the same thing. And that's what I have with my community, is that we are bringing people together intentionally so that they're able to support one another. So you don't have to go through it alone. When you reemerge, you get together with your friend community, you're going to be whole. You're going to be able to talk to them about what it is that you actually do need right now. So I know I said a lot, but the key
You
thing
did, but
is,
it was good. It was good. I
yeah.
loved what you said about being intentional, because I believe building wealth is done intentionally. A lot of times it doesn't happen by happenstance. You have to be intentional, but you also have to be honest about who you are and where you are. I heard what you said, work sometimes relates to your identity. And I think a lot of people, if they're not doing that anymore, they have shame around that. But it is a life event and it is temporary. And that's what I would love for people to understand during this process. The last government shutdown that we had was in 2018, 2019, during the Trump administration, and it lasted 35 days, just a little bit over a month. Those individuals were able to go back to work and were able to catch up. And all the things that we've discussed prior to you coming on about, having a savings and putting aside a certain amount, making sure that you're cutting luxury expenses, and being intentional about what you're doing with your money. But I can't dismiss that you said community. And a lot of times when people are laid off of work, they feel sometimes isolated because their identity is tied to what they did, not who they are. I think that's important, because you should not be in community for those who don't value you, that just value what you do. I think that is so important. You've been an awesome guest, and thank you for sharing a wealth of knowledge. Do you have any closing remarks about moving forward and any additional practical tips that our listeners can learn from?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things is what you just said, Tiffany, is that one is having the opportunity to evaluate who you really are. And one of the things that we can all do to get that is to remember who we really are. And if we don't remember, then inviting others who we trust in our lives to tell us, because sometimes we fall into these deep, abysmal
Yes.
traps of, and
Mhm.
we don't know how we got there in the midst of a
Mhm.
layoff, because layoffs are very tricky. One day we're given the presentation of our lives and we're seeing these wonderful bonuses and incentive pays, and we're going on trips all over the world. And then the next day you receive the news that you're no longer needed,
Mhm.
that your job has been phased out, that the company that you once worked at, it would no longer exist, or it's been acquired. And that will feel like it's a personal affront, an attack,
Mhm.
that your career is no longer going to be on a particular trajectory. But you still have to know who you are. And I know that it's hard to hear. I've been there. I know
Mhm.
how difficult it is. And I don't want anybody to think that it is an easy road. It is not.
Mhm.
People lose their houses in the midst of furloughs, inability to make car payments, because the people who run these companies, they do not care that you do not have the cash to cover yourself. But what the money is an energetic representation of what we value. It is
Say
not
that
who
again.
you are.
Absolutely.
It
Mhm.
is an energetic representation of what we value. It is
Mhm.
not who you are. Who you are
Mhm.
is far more than that. And
Mhm.
so being able to be clear about who you are will keep you. It just will. When you
Awesome.
are unsure, knowing that you have a particular set of values, remember your work history, remember who you are still that person, that amazing person that you were the last time that you showed up for work. You are that amazing person that you've been to your family. You are not your job. You are who you are. And
Exactly.
this is the opportunity to figure that out, because you will have time of seclusion, because the concerns will stop at some point. People will express concern immediately if they hear about, if you tell them about your job loss. They
Mhm.
will express concern, but they will not know all the time what it is that they can do. And a lot of times we don't have the vocabulary to let people know what it is that we actually do need when we're going through a job loss. And so my invitation for your audience is to use this time to get clear about what you really want now and going into the future, so that you can make and create this time, create a strategy that is thoughtful about who you are now and who you are becoming. What's unfolding for you? What are you hearing the voice of God say about your next in your life?
Mhm.
And use that to map out your next steps. Use that to think about what your business might be if you have a side hustle, which everyone should, because we do
Yes, they
live in the
should.
gig economy. And the gig
Mhm.
economy has been talked about for about 15 to 20 years. We've
Mhm.
known that this was coming at some point, that everybody would need to have at least one side hustle and be able to be employed based on their highest level of skill, right? We've known that was going to come. They should have that. And they should be able to have a way to support themselves, whether or not it's through entrepreneurship or if it's through a full time job. But don't shame the full time job. The full time job can still be
Absolutely.
very important, because that can be a way to fund your dream. Because if you don't have that mix of funds in your accounts, it doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. And for some that do have the mix of funds inside of their accounts and other investments, it still might
Mhm.
need to be that they have a job, because they have so many responsibilities they have to think
Sure.
about. They need to do
Mhm.
that. So I think everyone's situation is unique, and they have to weigh out what it is that they're going to do or not going to do based on unique financial profile. But that's the reason why it's good to have a good trusted financial advisor who can help you to sort out all of those things and think through what makes the most sense based on their financial
Mhm.
picture, and then where they believe God has taken them to.
Excellent. So this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. We're jumping in on tip 4, diversifying. your income streams. We're going to jump into and expand on being intentional about the decisions you're making. Thank you so much, Dr. Anitra Manning, for coming and educating our audience on diversifying your income, identifying with who you are during this time, and making that spiritual connection.
Tip 4, keep long-term planning intact. Shutdowns are temporary. Your retirement, insurance, and wealth goals are long-term. Things like paying insurances, life insurance policies, long-term care policies, even small things like car insurance. From events like the event of a death to a car accident, canceling these things means you actually take on the risk. Some good questions to ask yourself. Can you afford the cost of a funeral, a hospital bill, or replacing a car out of pocket? Probably not. Instead, look at cutting smaller luxuries, unused subscriptions, extra entertainment expenses. Go through those credit card statements and ask yourself what's essential and what's not. That way, your protection stays intact without derailing your future. Tip 5, make intentional decisions. Uncertainty often triggers fear-based decisions, but intentional wealth is about asking, does this decision move me closer to or further from my financial goals? Instead of pulling money out of retirement plans or investments or overspending because you're stressed, believe me, I've seen this happen. Pause and ask, am I reacting out of fear or am I choosing based on my long-term goals? Intentional decisions align with your legacy. This mindset shift is the difference between staying stuck and building lasting wealth. Shutdowns highlight how fragile financial systems can be. But the truth is, you don't have to live in fear of them. By building a cushion, knowing your risks, diversifying, protecting your future, and making intentional decisions, you stay in control of what really matters most, your financial peace of mind. So just to recap, make sure you have a savings. Generally, we ask 3 to 6 months. This is in case not only of shutdowns, but of job loss, sickness, or sometimes even death. That cushion ensures a smooth transition while you're experiencing a life event. Also, you want to make sure that you are diversifying your risks. You know if you're going to stay in the investment, how long you're going to stay in the investment, or if you're going to pivot and buy more shares if the market is down. You're also going to know during this temporary event that it is temporary, that it should not affect your long-term planning. Keep your long-term planning intact. And the last tip, make intentional decisions. Make sure you ask yourself, are these financial decisions getting me closer to my goal or keeping me further away? The most important thing is not to panic and have a plan. And if you already have a plan, keep on track with that plan. If this episode resonates with you, don't just stop here, take action. Book using the link below so we can map out a personalized wealth and tax strategy for you. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Until the next episode, make sure that you're building wealth intentionally, strategically, and with your legacy in mind.